Preventive diplomacy has been an enduring idea at the United Nations for many decades, and since the concept was first articulated over half a century ago, it has continued to evolve in response to new challenges. Now let's talk a bit about what it means and what it is, and maybe a little bit about, although closely related, it isn't. Preventive diplomacy is an action to prevent disputes from arising in the first place, prevent existing disputes from escalating into conflicts, and prevent any conflict that has arisen from spreading. Measures used to employ this tool include conflict early warning, fact-finding, confidence-building measures, early deployment, and humanitarian assistance. A lack of shared definition amongst policymakers has negated policymaking and practice efforts. Some view preventive diplomacy as soft mediation, while others refer to muscular diplomacy, which includes credible threats of preemptive military action. The same goes for conflict prevention, which some perceive as including preventive diplomacy, while others perceive it as a form of the contested concept of peace building. These disagreements stretch back more than 2 decades when the UN's 1992 Agenda for Peace outlined what preventive diplomacy is. At the time, UN Secretary General went further in clarifying that preventive diplomacy is very different from peacemaking, the resolution of large-scale conflicts through mediation and negotiation, and as such, only a distant relative from peacekeeping. This helps us understand the goals of preventive diplomacy, which the United Nations and others have associated with a specific set of actions such as good offices, facilitation, mediation, conciliation, adjudication, and arbitration. Accordingly, it does not include what others refer to as conflict prevention, which primarily includes human rights, humanitarian, and development assistance intended to neutralize the underlying sources of conflict by improving governance and socioeconomic conditions. While we refer to both preventive diplomacy and conflict prevention as preventive action, it may be more apt to view them not as concepts, but rather as key elements in what is increasingly referred to as infrastructures for peace or peace architectures. Such infrastructures are designed from below and are intentionally embedded in formal and informal institutions at the grassroots.
They combine networks of local community-based organizations, research and academic institutes, and faith-based associations that are engaged in actively monitoring disputes and sources of tension by addressing signs of trouble via conflict prevention and preventive diplomacy. Preventive diplomacy was first sanctioned with the United Nations through Article 99 of the United Nations Charter. Article 99 allows the Secretary General of the United Nations to bring forth to the Security Council information that they deem to be a threat against international peace and security. The Secretary General is tasked with seeking methods of mediation as a means for conflict prevention and resolution. It further gives authority to the Secretary General to monitor any threats on an ongoing basis, and as a result has been used for the purpose of commencing international investigations with conflict-affected member states. The duties set out in Article 99 and its current supplemental practice directions are said to have the Secretary General acting in a political role, more so than an administrative role. Article 99 has been under review by the General Assembly and Security Council with the intention of expanding the role of the Secretary General for the maintenance of international peace and security through the use of preventive diplomacy. The Security Council has urged the Secretary General to utilize its authority under Article 99 to work in cooperation with regional bodies in order to facilitate engagement in mediation. The Security Council believes that the Secretary General plays an important role in preventive diplomacy. It is their duty to ensure that risk assessment and conflict prevention capacities of the United Nations are improved along with early warning mediation support and other preventive activities around the world. General Assembly and Security Council resolutions established the Peacebuilding Commission in 2005. The Peacebuilding Commission is a body of the United Nations which advises the General Assembly and the Security Council on cohesive strategies for recovery of conflict-affected nations. The Peacebuilding Commission focuses its aims in bringing together relevant actors necessary for recovery and assisting those in acquiring resources that they need. The Peacebuilding Commission's policy work is directed by General Assembly and Security Council resolutions. These resolutions emphasize the importance of a comprehensive approach to sustaining peace, particularly through prevention of conflict and addressing its root causes. The Peacebuilding Commission and the Secretary General guide the United Nations processes on actively improving its effectiveness with mediation support using preventive diplomacy methods and strategies.
Intercommunal and related conflicts, often with cultural, religious, and linguistic dimensions, are among the main sources of political violence worldwide. Evidence has shown the conflict has established its own dynamics by the time such violence erupts, drastically reducing the chances of successful diplomatic engagement and ultimately leaving the international community with expensive choices and uncertain outcomes from other types of interventions. For effective preventive diplomacy, the international community urgently needs multilateral mechanisms with a specific mandate to address causes of political violence at an early stage. The High Commissioner on National Minorities of the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe is an excellent example of a multilateral mechanism dedicated solely to the prevention of conflict. Established in 1992 to help prevent conflict between groups through quiet diplomacy, the HCNM office offers an invaluable record of efficiency with nearly 3 decades of experience in several states. The most sustainable prevention occurs when relationships between groups are not only strengthened, but they are enshrined in domestic laws and/or institutions to ensure that they continue. The importance of the HCNM approach is its commitment to help states facilitate these changes in laws and institutions, helping to allow abstract values to be converted into practice and to continue to support such amendments for an extended period of time.
Preventive diplomacy in the United States is a concept that is underrated and barely used within the documents of the Department of State. For this reason, Canada is a much better example of a nation using preventive diplomacy in international affairs. The core function of the Department of State is diplomacy, which involves making U.S. foreign policy and influencing the policy of other nations. Using the best practices of diplomacy, the ambassadors and other representatives work to achieve the agency's mission to shape and sustain a peaceful, prosperous, just, and democratic world and foster conditions for stability and progress for the benefit of Americans and people everywhere. U.S. preventive diplomacy is used in a unilateral sense, especially with the Trump administration. They tend to use threats and rewards to persuade countries into agreements for prevention. This can be a damaging tactic as it can cause a country to lose trust and strain diplomatic relations. The Trump administration is reluctant to trade-offs and is primarily an American-first approach looking for economic benefits. President Trump has stated little about caring for international human rights abuses and doesn't necessarily want to help with prevention unless the US benefits. Unfortunately, this makes it even less likely that preventive diplomacy will be on the diplomatic agenda. Although the Department of State views American leadership, diplomacy, and development as indispensable to prevent and mitigate unforeseen crises and deliver sustainable security and prosperity for the nation, Trump's stance on diplomacy as being self-centered hinders prevention success and also strains foreign relations. Furthermore, diplomats must receive Senate approval before all agreements, which limits room for negotiation and overall prevention. With this current administration, prevention and international development aid may not be a primary goal. The main international development program is actually an independent agency from the U.S. federal government called USAID. This agency is primarily responsible for administering civil, foreign aid, and development assistance. Humanitarian assistance and confidence building in a nation is a key aspect of preventive diplomacy, which USAID focuses on. The Department of State and USAID set forth a joint strategic plan for the fiscal year of 2018 to 2022 to mend relations and lay out how U.S. diplomacy and USAID play a crucial role in a nation's effort to ensure stability, prevent conflict, and build citizen response local governance. Although known as a significant military force, there has been previous examples of the U.S. using preventive diplomacy. For example, President Obama traded sanctions relief for Iran's entry into a nuclear deal that removed the imminent threat of an Iranian breakout as a nuclear-armed country.
Preventive diplomacy in Canada. Canada's main objective within preventive diplomacy is to provide sustainable peace, security, and stability in conflict-affected states. Canada focuses on the measures of political inclusivity on a multilateral state basis while seeking international security, decreasing crime and terrorism. Canada conducts preventive diplomacy in a traditional and calm, friendly nature, employing the basic principles of democracy and freedom. The Government of Canada's aim with this strategy is to counter international foreign issues, sustaining peaceful relations with all states while keeping in mind the goal to protect Canada, Canada's interests, and international allies. According to the Government of Canada's Departmental Plan of 2018 and 2019, Canada's goal is to strengthen the rules-based international order to promote peace and prosperity in the world and to continue its active contributions to finding peaceful and durable preventive diplomacy solutions to international crises. The Government of Canada's department that represents international relations is Global Affairs Canada. This department's core responsibility with international advocacy and preventive diplomacy is to uphold respect and diversity for all state partners globally. Canada's goal is to build and maintain constructive relationships with all states. The Government of Canada is devoted to sustaining an effective relationship with the United States and engaging with all forms of government, such as federal, state, and local governments, addressing key areas such as trade, protection, energy, and the environment. Global Affairs Canada will work alongside other state departments to improve border facilitation and security, collaborate on energy infrastructure, increase environmental action, and address global issues and security threats. Further projects that are currently taking place with Canada is to highlight the crises that are occurring with the states such as Iraq and Syria. The Minister of National Defense, International Development, and Foreign Affairs Canada have implemented a new approach to address a policy that is more effective and is better to capitalize on Canada's area of expertise, which include the following: military training of security forces, the provision of humanitarian assistance and social services, the promotion of preventive diplomacy and good governance, and the rebuilding of infrastructure. This policy will help improve the overall state position and strengthen Canada's relationship with Syria and Iraq. This will increase their participation multilaterally to avert crises from transpiring, resolve crises, and reestablish the stability in their regions. Although Canadian official state partners have expressed a deep interest with maintaining peacekeeping within all states, the challenges that Canada faces is ensuring the interest and the involvement in a multilateral preventive scope, encompassing both governmental and non-governmental channels. Additionally, further challenges that are faced within Canada is whether it's their responsibility to maintain this role for every state.
Challenges facing the United Nations when engaging in preventive diplomacy: they must only engage in cases with a reasonable prospect of success. Cases that are unlikely to be effective, one must accept this and not engage in futile efforts that are doomed for failure. Another challenge facing the United Nations is the Secretary General must be careful to avoid becoming caught in the crossfires of national interests and politics. Challenges facing the private sector include the absence of a shared definition amongst policymakers inhibits policymaking and practice. The emergence of new stakeholders focused on conflict prevention and preventative diplomacy has generated challenges associated with coordination and quality control, producing further challenges of cooperation and mutual awareness. According to Zeke and McCaw, when preventive action is decentralized to the regional and local levels, there can be success. However, the likelihood that conflict prevention and preventive diplomacy will occur is less certain, as regional institutions tend to primarily be concerned with the interests of their member governments and not necessarily non-state actors. Cooperation and mutual awareness, lack of understanding of each other's efforts can also lead agencies to undermine each other. Opportunities moving forward to make preventive diplomacy more effective would be to formalize ways for stakeholders to communicate and coordinate their efforts better. As the quality of local peacekeeping groups and high-powered international mediation experts can vary, there should also be calls for the development of standards to which preventive diplomacy is executed. Zeke and McGaw also suggest that the international community redefines what conflict is. Complex interstate conflicts have given way to large-scale civil wars, which are themselves being rapidly overtaken by smaller rebellions and mid-sized insurgencies, large enough to cause significant damage to a national scale, but too small to draw urgent diplomatic attention from the United Nations Security Council.
Despite the challenges presently affecting preventive diplomacy, our US and Canadian research indicates that intergovernmental organizations can make preventive diplomacy a more integral part of their work and transform their achievements in operational prevention into longer-term initiatives by incorporating some aspects of the HCNM model. These include being more proactive in their engagement by quietly engaging state actors when violence is a possible outcome of internal tensions. Creating a more robust conflict assessment capacity and being aware of where and when such escalation risks are developing and what strategies might be effective. Using the norms that define the organization more creatively as an incentive for early action by states to address grievances and give credit for doing so. Arranging to stay engaged over a longer period, at the very least to keep a watching brief on simmering tensions and at most to help states change their capabilities over time to be more inclusive and proactive in preventing violence. Further developing the mediation skills of their diplomats and enhancing the capacity of the IGO itself to support these mediation functions at the highest standards of the practice. In conclusion, on an international level, the significance of the mandate of the HCNM which explicitly allows him to reach a potential situation of conflict on his own initiative without the permission of the host state, is a powerful development in international law. The key result of this provision is that he can intervene well before a conflict turns into violence, thus fulfilling the mandate of preventive diplomacy. Do you believe that all states should employ a multilateral mechanism with an explicit mandate to address preventive diplomacy, specifically Canada? What are the benefits and/or challenges that you foresee developing in international law regarding preventive diplomacy as you understand it?